right. Vanessa, thank you so much for joining us. And welcome everyone for joining us for this session of OKSA Connects. As you can see, today we're joined by Vanessa Morrison to discuss programs in Oklahoma that support youth of color. Before we get into the discussion, I would like to briefly introduce our guest, Vanessa. So Vanessa is a social planner and crisis response professional who is dedicated to empowering and supporting communities. She has received her master's degree in regional city planning from University of Oklahoma's College of Architecture. Vanessa's professional and academic opportunities have allowed her to design and lead approaches to address injustices in communities, coordinate engagement opportunities for marginalized groups. She has spoken on several media platforms about these things, including national public radios. She's also experienced in developing and implementing engagement strategies that reach into multifaceted communities, including trauma, exposed youth, survivors of violence, business spaces, advocacy groups, state and local governments, and religious communities. So her robust educational and experiences in community engagement, planning, and crisis management give her a unique and valuable insight into initiating and sustaining change. So we're very excited to have her today. She's very inspiring and amazing. Thank you, Vanessa, for joining us today.
Thank
This
you
was
for
a
having
brief
me.
this was a brief introduction. So would you like to tell us something else more about yourself and about your work? Would you like to add more to the introduction?
Sure. So thank you all so much for having me. I always love to work with OKSA, and I really admire you all and the work you all do. So thank you for having me on. I see some familiar names on. So hi, everyone. Thank you for joining my little interview. So yeah, you covered a lot in the bio. It's always kind of awkward to hear your own bio, but just a little bit more insight on the work that I do. I would generally describe it as doing projects and work that are rooted in social justice, equity, and community development initiatives in my community. Sometimes when people hear my background, they hear city planning and they hear domestic violence and trauma, they kind of get confused about that. But essentially that common theme throughout all my projects is really being participatory in the change that I want to see in my community. And most of my projects have really been inspired by challenges that I've lived through growing up as a Black girl in Oklahoma, as a young Black woman, and now as an adult, as I like to say. Just seeing how these specific issues have disproportionately impacted my community and the people that I care about has really inspired me to create these initiatives and create these programs just to be a part of that change. You know, too often I feel like we always are expecting other people to do something about what we want to see change. And for me, I've just never been okay with that. And instead of just waiting for someone else to create something or waiting for someone to understand me or see me as who I am, I have just been inspired and have been so honored and grateful to work with some amazing individuals who want to work to see the change that they hope happens for their community. So generally speaking, all of that is rooted in just being participatory in that change that I wish to see. And so from a social perspective, like Cut It Forward, which I'll share more about here in a little bit, in Black space, from a spatial community neighborhood perspective, those are just where my passions align and fall within, and have been two big projects that I've worked on just to be part of that change.
Mm-hmm. It's very profound what you said, that a lot of time we want change, but change starts from us. We can take an initiative. That's very beautiful. So you have experience in developing and implementing engagement strategies to reach communities that are normally left out of the conversation. when planning programs and initiatives. Can you tell us why it's important to include those voices and why it's important to that for sustainable change? So change that is sustainable and long-term.
Yes, engagement to me is the first step in really building any type of initiative or serving any population. And too often I look around and I see these initiatives and programs that are trying to do amazing work, but have really missed an opportunity in engaging the actual individuals that they are trying to support and uplift. And I just think that's such a tragedy, honestly, because the people with the lived experience are the experts of their situation, of the challenges that they live close to each and every day. And if we're not engaging and including them, not just an engagement like, hey, let me interview you, thank you for the data, and I'll see you later. I'm talking about engagement from every level of what you're building. I don't think it can be sustainable, and I don't think it can really truly reflect the needs and address the priority needs of the community. And so that's something that I'm very intentional about in everything that I do. And I think it's so critical, again, to co-develop and collaborate. We too often treat people like subjects or people that we need to fix and change, but they are the individuals, again, that live closest to these issues. So who better than them to guide and inform and lead initiatives that are addressing the challenges that they live through, and oftentimes what their families have lived through and their generations back have lived through. And so engagement is critical. There's no job, book, class that will give you expertise over the very individuals who have lived those experiences directly. And I just think it's critical to honor those lived experiences and to collaborate with individuals who are closer to those issues at every level of the movements that we create or the solutions that we're developing, to ensure that, again, they're reflecting the needs of the community, they're co-developed by the community, and that they're truly serving those priorities, and we're not missing any important gaps or opportunities to do the work that we need to do effectively.
Yeah, anytime we do something, if we don't do it with those people, we do it to them. So it's very important to include them. And I would like for us to expand a little more on that. It's a very important issue. So communities of color have been left out of the spaces of influence when it comes to how communities are physically designed and planned for. So there's a big problem with lack of diversity in these decision-making spaces. I'm curious to know, what do you think, what are some of the intended and unintended consequences of not having Black voices at these decision-making positions and tables? Could you tell us about that a little bit?
Yeah, that's such a great question. You know, there are so many. I could probably spend this entire interview talking about all of the detriments that come when we're not being inclusive, and really not just inclusive, but reflective, truly reflecting the community that we're serving. And especially as it relates to marginalized groups who have been pushed to the margins of their community and have not been included in those processes, and therefore have had to take the brunt of the consequences of what happens when they're not included. But I think one of the biggest and, again, overlooked issues that come with not engaging those voices and not having those voices at the table is erasure. And also as it relates to the built environment, dominant culture walks outside of their door every single day and is affirmed by the environment that surrounds them, through buildings, through monuments, through plaques and billboards and things of that nature. And that does something to you as far as empowerment and confidence and your ability to feel like you're capable, to be walking around an environment where you feel safe and included and affirmed by what's surrounding you. But when you're a person of color and you're walking out every day, you see no trace and no reflection of you in the built environment around you. Or maybe you did at one point in your childhood, but now as an adult, that space has been demolished, or it's been gentrified out and now there's no representation of you there. That is psychologically damaging. And I just think, especially when we think about the context of Oklahoma, of having the highest number of Black founded townships more than anywhere else in the nation, over 50, all of the opportunities that were here that brought Black folks to Oklahoma for economic stability, for safety, to escape these urban spaces where they experience a lot of violence and racism and trauma. This was really a land of opportunity for Black people and families to come here and build legacies and have safety and have prosperity. And there's so much history that comes along with those lived experiences that we just do not see reflected in books, in the built environment, in our communities, and more. And so I just think there's a psychological component that I think is often overlooked when we talk about these topics. And for me, coming from this trauma, mental health background and the work that I've done, I'm really interested in investigating that more and really understanding those longstanding issues that happen when people walk outside their doors and do not see reflections of them in their environment. So I think the erasure piece is a big intended in some cases, but also unintended consequence of when we don't include voices at the table to help us preserve that heritage, tell those stories accurately, and push towards initiatives that protect those spaces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is very important to see yourself represented, whether it's like, as you said, Billboard or the shows that you're watching, but also represented accurately, not playing to the stereotype and all. And that's how it leads to having your voices heard. Like programs, when they're made, they're more successful if they're made with considering the people of lived experiences, people who are actually going to be using those programs, as opposed to programs who are made that someone comes in like, this is what you need.
Right.
There's a big difference in research as well, like which one is more sustainable and effective.
Right, right, absolutely.
So before I go to the next question, I would like to let our audience on Facebook and Zoom know that feel free to send any questions or comments for Vanessa through Facebook comment section, or you can utilize the chat function on Zoom. So Vanessa, I'm curious about your initiative called Black Space Oklahoma. Could you tell us about that a little bit?
Yeah, so Black Space Oklahoma is a nonprofit that I co-founded back in 2018, along with a woman named Gina Shofala, who's a city planner here locally. We actually met in our master's program here at the College of Architecture and really saw immediately how we were a minority and were not really represented as professionals and in the academic space. And as welcoming and lovely as our college experience was, that was felt as women of color, being minorities in this program and looking around us and not really seeing, when we go to conferences and events and things like that, not really seeing us represented in any of these arenas, these professional arenas. And so in 2018, we connected with a group called Black Space New York City. So Black Space New York City is like in the headquarters, if you will, of the organization, and we're actually a part of this national network now. There's Black Space New York City, Chicago, Atlanta, Indianapolis, and Oklahoma. And Oklahoma was the third affiliate to launch. So we're super excited about creating that history here. And so we essentially are a collective of urbanists, Black urbanists and allies. And urbanist really is kind of like an umbrella term that describes professions that work within the built environment. So architects, city planners, designers, and more, activists even, and artists as well, who are working to protect, honor, and preserve Black contributions to the built environment. And so we have been so fortunate to be part of this collective and not only be building this capacity locally, but now having allies and friends and connections in other states as well to really amplify our experiences and do what we can to promote the protection and the honoring of the work that we do as it relates to community spaces. And so Black Space Oklahoma, each affiliate has done several different projects, but here locally, we've done a lot of projects that are rooted in community engagement. Mm-hmm. And so working, a lot of our work has been based in Northeast Oklahoma City, which is a predominantly Black community here in the metro area. Many of us are from that community, work, live, and play in that community. And so we have worked on initiatives to really center their voices and lived experiences and and what life is like in Northeast Oklahoma City, and how can we honor that culture, celebrate it, and make sure that as planning and development and investment happens in the area, we're making sure that the residents are at the forefront of all of that work, and working with them to extend resources to them should they want to champion or start a project in their community as well. And another tenet of Black Space is really broadening the pipeline for more Black and Brown students to enter these fields academically, because again, there is a huge deficit in the representation of people of color in these spaces, which I do believe is part of the issue that translates into inequities when we talk about how cities are shaped, designed, and built. You know, if we're not at the table, if the people making those decisions are not reflective of the community, then we can't possibly have this harmony and inclusion and justice that everybody is striving for. And so we are working to collaborate with the OU College of Architecture and others to really get more students interested in these professions and really helping them identify a pathway to come to school and study these topics and become professionals that can really work and help make our cities more reflective. So that's a snapshot of Black Space, and our website is blackspaceok.org, where people can learn more about the work that we're doing.
Mm-hmm. And we can also add the website to the Facebook Live if someone wants to check it out. But speaking of representation and inclusion, many children of color enter foster care and adoptive care with their culturally specific hair and skincare needs unmet or misunderstood. These challenges often adversely impact their self-esteem, self-image, and their health and overall identity. Vanessa, can you tell us about your initiative, Cut It Forward, and how this program is helping tackle these issues?
Sure. So yes, I think a lot of people know this about me by now, but I grew up in foster care. I went into care when I was 13 and aged out as an adult. And part of my experience in care towards the tail end was in a kinship placement, but the first half of that was living in non-traditional foster family structures. And so living with someone who was not related to me and or did not look like me, did not come from a similar ethnic or cultural background as me. And so one of the first challenges felt as a child of color growing up in that system was not living with people or not having people around me who understood what my hair and skincare needs looked like and what they required to be healthy and okay. And so it was horrible growing up, you know, not living with people who understood those needs, being bullied in school, being made fun of, looking like you're in foster care is something that alumni often talk about when we talk about how our hair and skincare needs were neglected, and just how detrimental that was to our self-esteem and our sense of identity. And even with many of us coming from hard places, even in those contexts, our hair and skincare oftentimes was taken care of, you know. And so to come from your biological family and then going into the system, and it's such a strange experience. And on top of that, not having access to your basic needs was a big issue for me, my siblings, peers, and every person I essentially know that grew up in that same environment, in that same system. And so as young as like 15 or 16 years old, I would be invited to speak on panels and at foster care worker trainings, judges conferences, and more, and share my experiences about being a child in foster care. And that was something that I always spoke about was, you know, not having access to my basic essentials. These are not luxury items. These are not things that are on a wish list. These are things that I need to take care of myself as a Black girl. And I did not have that in every situation that I lived in. And so I always kind of like joke that the work at Cut It Forward started when I was in foster care still, because I was advocating on behalf of those issues even as a teen, alongside of other individuals who grew up in that system that were people of color. And so as I became, you know, an adult, I just started kind of doing the work organically. I didn't really have like a nonprofit or anything as a 20-something-year-old, but I just saw a need and wanted to do something about it. And so I would do hair care product drives. My fiance is also a co-founder of the organization. He's a professional barber and owns barbershops and is in the hair industry here locally. And so him and I would work together to do haircuts for kids in shelters. We would do back to school events, product drives, and more. And then after we saw how the need so far outweighed our capacity is when we decided, okay, we really need to create a dedicated effort and really be working to build a sustainable resource that runs 40 hours a week to support these families and these kids that need the support the most. And so in 2018, we filed the paperwork, launched a nonprofit, and since then have had the honor and privilege of working with an amazing board of directors to really create these solutions and resources for families. And so Cut It Forward is all about being that bridge to understanding the needs and what it takes to take care of ethnic and textured hair and melanated skin. And not just teaching the components of taking care of it, but also helping families and caregivers and professionals who are working with children with these needs understand the cultural component and the significance of these different elements of who they are. You know, it's so much more than an aesthetic. Your hair, especially when you're a Black child or Black adult, it is not just an aesthetic. It is a representation of who you are. It's connected to your culture. It's a way that we bond through hair and skincare. We bond truly in the Black community through those methods. And it's important to honor and protect that. And so we're just here to support families who are caring for, and professionals who are caring for children with those needs, giving them a safe space to ask questions and maybe say the wrong thing, and they're not going to be judged or, you know, scrutinized for not understanding different things. And also we have, you know, people of color that attend our workshops and our resources, especially older grandparents who are caring for their grandchildren. There has been a huge shift in the natural hair care movement and within the Black community. And there's different hairstyles and techniques that grandparents don't know how to do with their kids. And so we've had older grandparents come and ask us for help. So it's not just for, it's for everyone who is caring for a child who has these needs. And we just want to be that community that wraps around them and creates a safe space to learn, ask questions, and get access to that support. So we have 3 programs. We have an education program, which is like the meat of our organization. And that's where we go out in the community and we do hair and skincare workshops for providers, for families and children and more. We actually just did a workshop with the children in the shelter at Pivot Youth Shelter and just teach about, again, the culture of ethnic hair and skincare. How do we take care of it? What are techniques, styling methods? What are products that we can use depending on your hair type? It gets really layered. And so we come in with that content, teach individuals how to understand those elements better and therefore take care of the hair and skin a little bit better. We also have a product program where we collect products on a donation basis all throughout the year. And we partner with organizations such as Pivot and Halo, Citizens Caring for Children, the Oklahoma County Foster and Adoption Unit, and more to provide products to them, because that's a huge barrier for a lot of agencies, is knowing what to buy and having the budget to buy it. And so we work with them to help supply their pantries. So when they have kids, whether it's an emergency situation or a child had to be relocated and transition into a new home, they can help that child keep access to the products they need no matter where they go. And then our third program is our professional network, where we're working with professionals, hair and skincare professionals in the community. And we're working with Halo, and they've done trainings for us in the past to train barbers and stylists on being trauma informed. And so we can create this network to refer families to when they need professional services like haircuts and braids and things like that. So they can go to a trusted professional who they know will do their hair well or take care of their skin well, but also treat the family with a level of sensitivity that maybe someone wouldn't know how to do had they not had that trauma-informed training. So we have those 3 programs. We are growing. We've gotten some amazing grant opportunities to expand our programming more. We're actually going to be hiring some positions soon. Super excited. We just started in 2018 and now we're already looking at hiring staff. And we've had people all over the nation. Actually, I just got an email from Texas and Wyoming this week saying, hey, how do we do Cut It Forward in our community? So it's just amazing to see people really understanding and prioritizing these issues and wanting to identify ways they can support this work and bring these resources to the families they're working with.
Yeah, it's a very great and much needed program. So for everyone in the audience, if you have any questions about Black Spaces, Cut It Forward, or for Vanessa, please use the chat and comment section. As you said, Vanessa, every child deserves to be properly groomed and feel confident in their sense of self, and also in have their cultural identity. So I want us to expand a little bit more on that. What resources do you recommend for people to grow more in their understanding and knowledge of the needs of youth of color? Where could they go? Where could they start?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I know that part of Cut It Forward, that's something we're trying to develop and like really wrap our heads around and figure out how we can provide some of that context for individuals who want to learn more. We've recently had requests for trainings on not just hair and skincare, but just how do I understand these experiences better. And so I think there's a lot of interest to develop that, but there's unfortunately just not a lot of options out there that I know of that are standing right now. But I think, you know, anytime you can engage someone, you know, back to the whole engagement piece, anytime you can engage someone with lived experience, I think is an amazing way to get context and understand things at a deeper level. You know, I'm not familiar with too many established resources that just provide that as a service. It's kind of an intimate experience that only someone who's been through that can really share with you. And so I think anytime you can hire, center those voices and honor and respect people for their time and compensate them for their time, I think is a really amazing opportunity. I know with Cut It Forward, we actually have an alumni committee. So we work with individuals who have experience with foster care and also are people of color who have gone through these struggles, who we work with to make sure that we're centering the work on their experiences as well. And so we have actually been thinking about, okay, like this is really a big need. How can we provide that resource? And so I think, you know, it's hard to like just go out there and find someone who has lived experience, but I know there are people who are working and trying to wrap their head around how can they make that a resource that's available to people to deeply understand. But I think, again, just if you can engage someone who has lived experience, I think that's a great way to understand what those lived experiences are like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very way of putting it. Just ask and go, be curious, learn more. So Vanessa, you, as we can see, we started the session, the interview session with the saying, like, if you want to see a change, you be that change. It starts with you, and you're a great example of that with all that the programs that you have. You're a role model for a lot of young girls and boys, and have been regionally recognized for your achievements working with communities of color. What is your message to other girls and boys with the drive and passion of doing good in the world, and no matter what that is, but they want to see a change and they want to take a step towards it? What would you say for those young people?
Yes, that's such a good question. And it's always so hard to answer because I feel like there's so much. But I would definitely say don't let anybody stop you. Do not. You'd be surprised like how much flack I've gotten with Cut It Forward, starting Cut It Forward, and just criticism and people calling me and asking me why I'm doing this and it wasn't my idea and you know things of that nature. Even though I've lived through foster care and have those experiences, you wouldn't think you would be getting that kind of flack from people. And unfortunately, it hasn't been a lot of people, but there definitely have been some naysayers out there, as Brene Brown would say, sitting in the cheap seats out there that have so much to say about what you're doing, but don't let anyone stop you. You are your number one fan, and there have been days where I've had to be my own cheerleader, my own supporter, and I think especially if you come from adversity and foster care, that's almost kind of like a skill that you develop, you know, under unfortunate circumstances oftentimes, but resiliency is something that is not new to us. And so just tapping into that, realizing and recognizing how much you've overcome and how strong you are for even being here to this day, and just tapping into that power and developing rituals. That's my big thing, is like developing these things I do every day to tap into that power and to affirm myself and keep myself going. If you can find people to support you, that's always great. Although there's challenges that come with starting something new. People get threatened, people get intimidated, they get scared. It might be hard for you to find that support system, but even if you can just find one person who can just say, you know what, Vanessa, you're doing a great job, keep going, or you have my support, or what can I do for you to support you, I think it's always good too. So finding your tribe when you can, but if you can't, and if you don't have one, it's okay, because you are your tribe. Keep pushing, don't let anybody stop you, and just know that whatever you want to do, you can do it. You just have to create a plan and follow and stick with it. There was no blueprint from Black Space. You know, fortunately, we're connected to a national network, but every community has its own context. And so there's things that are easier to do in New York City than are hard to do here in, Midwestern Oklahoma, So just being okay with not knowing everything, get comfortable with getting a little uncomfortable, being challenged and pushed in different situations and new situations. Don't get discouraged by that, and just develop your rituals to pour into yourself and to take care of yourself, because it's when you're doing something new and you're doing something for your community, there's going to be people out there that are not going to believe in you or support you, but that's all right, because they can't stop you, and they will not stop you.
Yeah, that's very profound. If you want to create change, get comfortable in the uncomfortableness, because you are going to face some pushback. Before you share how can people get in contact with you and reach out to you if they want to, I'd like to create some space. If someone in the audience have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself, ask the questions, use the chat function, or let me know, James, if there's any questions on Facebook. If not, Vanessa, while we wait for that, could you share if someone wants to get in contact with you, reach out to you, how can they get in contact?
Sure. So Cut It Forward has its own website. I think they were dropped there in the chat, but Cut It Forward is at just cutitforward.org. Black Space is blackspaceok.org. Both of those organizations, they are on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and just Cut It Forward on everything, Black Space on everything. They're separate organizations, but they're all have their own social media, own websites. For me personally, I am trying to get my little Twitter game together. I'm trying to be active. I went inactive for 5 years. I just got too busy, but I am back and active on there. And my handle on Twitter is the letter V in the city. And city has 2 Y's, because I think V in the city with 1 Y was taken. I know how to spell, but be in the city with 2 Y's on Instagram and Twitter if you want to stay in touch with me, and I'll follow you back.
Thank you, Vanessa, for joining us today and sharing your profound and valuable insight into a very important and big problem, which is representation and having the voices of lived experiences present at the decision-making table. We really appreciate your time, and we will keep having these conversations and talking about these and having more initiatives like you have. The change will happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for everyone who attended.